excited about this because I actually have just recently used Paul's book in helping me find a really good hiking spot. Paul's first addiction of many is traveling, then sports, then walking around in the mountains, a few other things, and food. Put that together and he became a guy who wrote about sports for newspapers, travel for all sorts of people, hiking and camping books, and now this weird breakfast idea, which should be interesting. Paul grew up in Memphis, went to school in Texas, worked for some newspapers here and there, freelance, cooked on fishing boats in Alaska, had some other cool and crappy jobs, and moved to Portland in 1996 because it had good coffee and beer, and it didn't get hot like Memphis, and there were nearby mountains. In addition to a self-published book, Paul has also written four for Keen Communication. Other titles are 60 Hikes Within 60 Miles of Portland, that's the one I have, Day and Overnight Hikes in Oregon's Pacific Crest Trail, Best in Tent Camping, Oregon, and Peaceful Places, Portland. Paul, come on up.
I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a guy playing a guitar back here. I brought him. So, hello. I appreciate you letting a hiking guidebook author come out with all these serious writers. I've never done a reading before, because, I write hiking books. But I'm going to do one in a second for you, so you can always tell people, like, you saw my first reading, if I ever become famous or something. But first I want to tell you a story from the glorious life of a hiking guidebook author. I was researching years ago the either third or fourth edition of this book. This is now the fifth edition. I've been doing it since 2001. And there are two hikes out in the gorge that are kind of close to each other. One's called the Coyote Wall, and one is called Catherine Creek. You don't need to remember these names, it's okay. But I looked at the map and looked at the area and thought there must be some way to connect to these two hikes, right? So I go up there and I walk up to the Coyote Wall and I find these faint trails heading off towards Catherine Creek, and I just take off and start going that way. And I think, this is going to be cool, right? This is like a hiking adventure. But I have no idea where I'm going. I could be walking through private property, I don't have a clue. So I'm going along and I think sooner or later I will see Catherine Creek, or I will somehow figure out where I am, or maybe I'll encounter someone who's been hiking at Catherine Creek. I don't know, I'll figure it out. So I'm going along, and I see off to the right, I figure I'm getting pretty close to Catherine Creek, and I see off to my right these two women walking up the hill towards me. And you could tell from 200 yards away, these women were exhausted. They were destroyed. They were dragging along, just like could barely even lift their heads, So I walked down to where they were. They looked up at me, and I said, hey, I'm curious, did you start hiking at Catherine Creek? And they said, we have no idea. We don't know where we are. We're completely lost. She said, she pointed to this ditch in the ground and said, that could be Catherine Creek for all the hell we know. And I said, well, where have you been? What's been going on? She said, really, we've been lost since we were in the car. We don't understand where we are. We don't have any idea what's going on. She said, the only thing we know for sure is, and she pulls out of her backpack my book. And she says, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I said, really? That guy doesn't know what he's talking about? She said, yeah, we don't think he's ever even been here. I said, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, we need to figure this out before I say, oh, he's been here. So I said, well, when did you first get lost? She said, in the car. And I said, okay. So it happens that for I think the third edition of the book, I had driven to every trailhead in the book, again, just to be sure. So I knew my directions were gold. And there's one spot on that drive, if you miss a turn, you wind up in this town called Lyle, Washington, which you're not supposed to go to. And I said, when you got lost driving out here, by chance, did you go through Lyle, Washington? And she said, yeah, didn't even say anything about that in the book. And I said, well, here's why. And I showed her in the direction, see, you missed that turn right there. She said, oh. And then I said, okay, when you started hiking, did you go left or right from the trailhead? She said, well, we went to the left. I said, well, I think it says here you're supposed to go to the right. And she said, oh, when she was really starting to kind of relax. And then she said something she felt better about later. She said, you know, we thought this was kind of funny because usually this guy knows what he's talking about. She said, but we thought like he wrote this one just on hearsay, like, which is still a phrase that my friends torture me with all the time. He wrote this on hearsay. So then I said, you want to see something funny? And she said, I guess. So I opened up the About the Author page and held it up next to my face. I thought she was going to have a heart attack. And so I thanked them in the 4th edition. The 4th edition is the Lost Ladies of Catherine Creek. That's what I call it. These are the kinds of things that happen when you write a book like this. I've never written fiction. As Brad mentioned, I grew up in the newspaper business. I can write about something if it happened right in front of me. If I was responsible for making up a story, and I'm a decent liar, but I don't know if I could ever write fiction like you folks do. However, I found a passage of the preface to my book that I think I'll do a reading. What the heck, right? Okay. So this is part of the preface to the 5th edition, which was also, by the way, the preface to the 4th edition. I'm lazy and I didn't feel like rewriting it. So, all right. Here's a funny admission from the author of a hiking book. There comes a time, almost every time I go hiking, when I kind of hate it. Sometimes it's the weather. I'm pretty much a fair weather hiker. Sometimes it's the big uphills. Sometimes it's the big downhills. Sometimes it's the tedious drive back home, in particular that stretch of Interstate 84 between Troutdale and I-205. Sometimes it's the early start, or the late return, or all the chatter on the trail. Maybe I'm just getting old, and my 47-year-old legs and back complain a good bit more than their 25-year-old versions did. Maybe it's the pounds I put on writing the Breakfast Guide book. My doctor still gives me crap about that one. And maybe I fell into the trap of letting my favorite pastime become part of my job. Slogging up a viewless hill in the rain because, quote, I have to do this for my book, hardly screams glamorous life of a writer. So why do I do it? It's for the little moments in between them. Take Multnomah Falls, for example. You drive there, you see the falls, you fight the crowds, maybe you drag yourself up the paved trail to the top of the falls for a look around. And yes, I'm being a horribly jaded Oregonian, but there's an element of, yeah, I've been there and I've done that. But if you keep going, there's a place just a little further up, right past the old bridge over the creek above the falls, where the pavement ends, the crowds turn around, and it turns into a trail, a path leading into the woods, bound for miles away. And every time I go there, there's a little moment waiting for me there, like a present I'm always getting for the first time. It's in the moving on, the letting go, the opening up, the knowing that behind me are town and life and work, money, cars, computers, and ahead of me are only more trail of trees and creeks and birds and cliffs and mountains. My brain knows that I can walk from that spot using only forest trails to Mount Hood, to countless other quiet, wild places, and that's part of it. But it's my heart where the little moments happen. A kind of release and relaxation, a simple knowing that from here on, it's just me or us and the woods, and I can go wherever I feel because I have everything I need right here with me. So those little moments are essentially what I write about. I mean, yeah, I write guidebooks to kind of tell you where to go and what to do when you get there and where to eat. But really what I'm after is I like to go and do interesting things and have experiences and then share that with other people so that maybe you can go do it too. It gives me great satisfaction when folks say, hey, I used your book, and they're not wearing a cast. That's always a compliment. I have had people get lost using my book. In fact, one time I woke up one morning to a flood of emails and voicemails and things. People like almost screaming incoherently into the phone about my book and some kind of a rescued hiker in the gorge. And I was like, this is like my worst fear, right? Is that they're going to find the person at the bottom of the cliff clutching my book. And it turns out that a woman, you guys know the Oneonta Gorge? It's a little narrow gorge that's part of it's in the Columbia River Gorge. It's a little tiny thing. It's narrow and about 100 feet deep. A woman fell into that. And somebody else saw her, this is all in the Oregonian, saw her down in the thing, and she was injured and couldn't get out. And the person who found her was using my book and went back out. I don't know why they mentioned the name of the book in the Oregonian, but I'm perfectly okay that they did. she goes back out, calls for search and rescue, and points on the map in my book where the lady was, and they went and got her. And I thought, hey, that's what you call good public relations. Anyway, so yeah, other books that I've written. Well, first of all, this book's just a little bit about what is it. It's 60 miles as the crow flies from the edge of the Portland area. Okay, that is a fight that I won with the publisher. They wanted it to be 60 driving miles, and I said, man, from 60 driving miles from Portland, you barely get to the coast or not. But I'm not writing that book. So it's about a 2-hour drive from the middle of Portland. Everything from easy hikes to hard hikes, all kinds of stuff in between. Kid-friendly stuff, hikes you can spend the night on if you want to. I try to make it sort of the hiking book for everyone. And then, we change a few things around each edition. One of the ones I wanted to mention, because it's out here on the west side, that's in this new edition that I really encourage people to go do, is a hike called the Salmonberry River Canyon. I don't see anybody nodding their head. This is a 16-mile canyon out in the Coast Range. It starts near the town of Timber, Oregon. You can stretch your definition of town to include Timber, Oregon. And it ends down at even less of a town called Salmonberry down on the Nehalem River. 16-mile canyon with a railroad that goes through it that for years they used to let people walk down the railroad, even when there were trains on the railroad. This is the Portland to Tillamook Railroad, I think it's called. And I actually had it in the book when there were trains on it. That was pretty exciting. You walk through a tunnel and you have to look and see if there's a train coming. But they allowed this, and it was all good. There's really good fishing up there. 2007, this horrendous flood comes along and wipes out the railroad tracks. It was so powerful, they figured out at one point that one of the tunnels got blocked up, and a lake about 50 to 70 feet deep formed behind that and then blasted its way out the tunnel. There are sections of railroad track down in the creek that were just shaped like a U from the force of this water that came down. They're never going to rebuild the railroad. They wrote it off. The state is considering making it a rail-to-trail program, which, by the way, if they do that, it'll go from Lake Oswego to Tillamook. They'd be a heck of a trail. So meanwhile, all the railroad bed is still there. A lot of the tracks are still there. The trestles all survived. And here's this 16-mile canyon with one point of road access that you can go walk down this railroad track. It's a little tricky to find the upper trail, but my driving directions are right. So that kind of thing I like to look for. It's not a trail, but it is a real adventure. You go through the tunnels, you go over these 100-foot high trestles. There's a lot of this cool stuff out there to go and do. Let me just check my time here real quick. I go on and on, so I brought a timer. Okay, just real quick, other books. Yes, I was a travel writer. After my sports writing career, I found out about travel writing, and I thought, you got to be kidding, right? I mean, I get to go on free trips, and then you're going to pay me to write about it? Come in. So I did that. And one of the things that I wrote about was eating a meal in a place. Like, I'm totally not a food critic. But I would describe a place, like I might write an article about historic downtown Hillsboro by describing like this restaurant, for example. And my favorite meal to go out and eat is breakfast. So I was having a conversation once with a friend of mine that writes fishing guidebooks, and I was telling him about all these breakfast articles I've written, and he said, well, have you ever done that for Portland? And I said, hell, I could write a whole book about places to eat breakfast in Portland. And then we looked at each other kind of funny and thought, wait, I actually could write an entire book about places to eat breakfast in Portland. And it was an insane idea, but I did. And the publisher that does all these outdoor books, they turned it down, thank goodness. And then somebody said you should publish it yourself. And so that's an even crazier idea, but what the hell, I'll try that. And I did. That's called Breakfast in Bridgetown, I love alliteration. And that's now in its 3rd edition. It is completely insane how many breakfast places there are. From the 2nd to the 3rd edition, I found 31 new restaurants just in the city limits of Portland. And yes, this led to this fantastic visit with my doctor, where I came in one year after I had done an edition of this book and a guide to the Pacific Crest Trail across Oregon. Right? I came in, he's like, "You look great, go home." And then I went in the next year, and he said, "What happened?" He was very kind. He said, "There's some more contours here, I think." And I said, well, I wrote a breakfast guidebook. And he said, "Do you have to get the French toast and bacon everywhere you go?" And I said, "Yes." No one cares about the oatmeal or the fruit cup, right? Nobody has ever asked me how's the oatmeal or the fruit cup. They want to know about the French toast and the bacon and the eggs Benedict. So when the corned beef hash. So anyway, so there's that book. Also did one Pacific Crest Trail in Oregon. My motto is I walked across Oregon so you don't have to. Maybe you've read Wild by Cheryl Strayed. None of that stuff happened to me on the trip. Other than my feet hurt and I hate hiking. There's that. Nobody tried to sleep with me. Sorry. So you can see that happened to her a lot, didn't it? In that book? It's strange. Anyway, the last of those, by the way, is this soft serve ice cream place in Cascade Locks, where every hiker stops. And if you ever wondered, by the way, how they get across the Columbia River, you ever wonder about this? Walking from Mexico to Canada, how do they get across the Columbia River? They walk across the Bridge of the Gods, which must be the most terrifying thing that they do in 2,600 miles. Anyway, so that book is just like the best parts of it. You don't have to do the whole thing. It's quite boring at times. Also did a book called Peaceful Places, Portland, which is just places to find some peace and quiet around town. Parks and gardens and quiet cafes and spiritual retreats and walks. Some of them are not all in Portland, some of them are around here. And what's the other book I did? Oh yeah, Best Tent Camping in Oregon. I had to look for a second. Nobody buys that one, so I don't know why. That's just a guide to the best car campgrounds around the state. So anyway, I don't know what else I'm supposed to say up here. It's been exactly 15 minutes, so I'll just say thanks very much.